At 61, Johnny Depp chose not to shout his truth, but to live it quietly. When he appeared at Cannes in 2023, it wasn't a comeback fueled by anger or triumph, but a calm acknowledgement that life had moved on. For decades, Depp had lived at the center of global attention, adored for his eccentric performances and misunderstood for his personal struggles. Fame once felt like freedom, until it became a cage built from speculation and constant judgment. Rather than fight endlessly against that tide, Depp made a choice few expected. He stepped away. No dramatic farewell, no announcement, just distance. In doing so, he reminded audiences that survival doesn't always look loud or victorious. Sometimes it looks like silence, reflection, and the courage to redefine success. Cannes didn't mark his return to fame. It marked his return to himself, leaving Hollywood without saying goodbye. In 2023, Johnny Depp quietly closed the door on Los Angeles, leaving behind the city that had shaped and strained him for over 3 decades. Hollywood, once his creative playground, had become a place where every move felt watched and weighed. Instead of explaining his decision, Depp packed up his life and relocated to the English countryside, settling in Somerset. There were no red carpets, no studio meetings, no farewell interviews. For a full year, he was absent from major public events, and the silence spoke louder than any statement could. When asked by a local newspaper why he vanished, Depp simply said he no longer lived to be noticed. He lived to be at peace. That sentence traveled far, resonating with people who saw it not as retreat, but as strength. It was a man choosing balance over applause. A new life in quiet places. Somerset offered Johnny Depp something Hollywood never could: anonymity. In the quiet rhythm of rural life, he found space to breathe, walk, read, and exist without expectation. Locals describe him as reserved but kind, someone who blends into the background rather than commands it. Mornings are spent outdoors, afternoons with books or music, evenings without cameras or crowds. This slower pace wasn't about hiding, but healing. For years, his identity had been shaped by characters, headlines, and assumptions. In Somerset, he reclaimed something simpler, being human without a script. The countryside became not an escape, but a reset. He didn't abandon creativity, he stripped it down. Away from industry pressure, Depp could explore who he was without needing to prove anything. Sometimes growth doesn't happen in bright lights, but in quiet rooms where no one is watching. Painting what words cannot say. Art became Johnny Depp's most honest language. Without press tours or interviews, his paintings began to speak for him. Deeply personal and often surreal, his work reflected introspection rather than celebrity. Portraits carried emotion without explanation, layered with silence and restraint. Within months, his art drew serious attention from collectors, selling for millions and appearing in respected exhibitions. Yet Depp never framed this as a business move. He described painting as a way to express thoughts he could no longer articulate aloud. It wasn't about recognition, it was release. Viewers noticed the shift: darker tones, emptier spaces, and an emotional stillness that felt earned. Critics described the work as raw and unguarded, created by someone who had lived through turbulence and come out quieter, not louder. Through art, Depp wasn't telling his story directly, he was letting people feel it. Music as a place to breathe music remained another constant, but even that changed form. Performing with Hollywood vampires across Europe, Johnny Depp stepped on stage without the pressure of starring roles or leading narratives. He played guitar, sang softly, and let the music exist without explanation. Audiences responded not to spectacle but sincerity. His performances felt grounded, stripped of ego, and focused purely on connection. Covers carried emotional weight, while his presence felt more like a collaborator than a celebrity. Music became a shared space rather than a performance. Depp once said he no longer had anything to sing loudly about, and that truth resonated in the quiet strength of his sound. It wasn't about proving relevance, it was about expression without demand. In these moments, Depp didn't reclaim the spotlight, he simply stood within it. comfortable with however bright or dim it happened to be, redefining success beyond the screen. Even without new films, Johnny Depp's influence never disappeared. His long-standing partnership with Dior continued to thrive, breaking sales records through campaigns that relied on legacy rather than presence. Archived footage, familiar imagery, and his enduring mystique proved something powerful. Relevance doesn't require constant visibility. Fashion houses welcomed him not as an actor, but as a symbol of individuality, resilience, and refusal to conform. Industry insiders quietly acknowledged that Depp no longer needed Hollywood's validation. Invitations still arrived from studios and festivals, but most went unanswered. This wasn't bitterness, it was choice. For the first time, success was defined on his terms. He didn't chase opportunity, he filtered it. In doing so, Depp shifted from being a participant in the system to someone operating entirely outside it, visible, influential, yet unattached. The weight of a public storm. Years earlier, Johnny Depp had found himself at the center of intense public scrutiny surrounding his personal life. Allegations, legal battles, and relentless media coverage reshaped how the world saw him almost overnight. For a long time, he said very little, watching narratives form without his voice. Careers paused, partnerships ended, and trust fractured. The experience left deep emotional marks, regardless of outcomes or opinions. Courtrooms replaced sound stages, and private moments became public debate. When legal proceedings eventually concluded, they resolved facts, but not feelings. According to those close to him, the aftermath wasn't celebration, it was exhaustion. Depp once wrote that the fight was never about revenge, only survival. That period didn't define him, but it changed him. It stripped away illusions and left behind a quieter understanding of how fragile reputation and loyalty can be. Healing without applause. After the storm passed, healing didn't come through interviews or victory laps. It came through distance, routine, and personal accountability. Depp began caring for his health quietly, adjusting his habits, focusing on stability rather than excess. Friends noted changes not just physical but emotional. He listened more, reacted less, and no longer felt the need to defend himself at every turn. When questions surfaced in public settings, he declined to reopen old chapters. That restraint spoke volumes. Healing for him wasn't about rewriting the past, but refusing to live inside it. Doctors and acquaintances observed steady improvement, both in health and demeanor. There was no public declaration of transformation, only consistency. Over time, it became clear this wasn't performance, it was genuine recalibration. The man who once thrived on chaos now valued peace more than vindication. A selective return to cinema. Johnny Depp's reappearance at Cannes with a French historical film marked a careful step back into acting, not a full return. The reception was warm, emotional, and deeply symbolic, especially outside Hollywood. European audiences embraced him as an artist rather than a headline. Critics debated the film, but few questioned his presence. It reminded the world that the talent had never left. It had simply been waiting. Subsequent offers came slowly and selectively, including projects led by directors who valued depth over marketability. These roles weren't about franchises or spectacle. They were intimate, character-driven, and reflective. Depp didn't rush back. He evaluated, waited, and chose only what resonated. Acting was no longer an obligation, it was an option, and that distinction changed everything about how, when, and why he returned to the screen. Living between two worlds. Today, Johnny Depp exists between worlds, not fully Hollywood, not fully removed. He creates without chasing attention and appears without explanation. His art, music, and selective roles reflect a man no longer seeking approval or clarity from others. European media describes him not as a star, but as someone rebuilding privately while remaining culturally present. That balance feels intentional. He hasn't erased the past, but he refuses to be owned by it. Fame no longer defines his worth, and silence no longer means absence. Depp's journey isn't about reclaiming what was lost. but discovering what remains when everything else falls away. His story resonates because it mirrors something universal: the need to step back, reassess, and begin again without apology. In choosing quiet growth over loud redemption, Johnny Depp found a different kind of strength, one that doesn't need to be explained.